Think you need gold paint to paint gold metal? It's not true. Painting metal realistically requires you to change the way you see metal. While metal has its own color, shiny metal acts as a mirror that reflects the objects around it, where those reflections take on the color of the metal. So how do we handle this? The secret is to use sharp contrast. Let me show you how. Studying the golden eggs, we can see that there is a light color on the bottom half of the eggs with a little bit of shading. And then suddenly in the middle of the eggs, there is a sharp line into a dark area, which again has a gradient. And then on top of that, there's yet another section that has a very sharp line, a very dark color next to the light color. If you can perceive this, if you can perceive the difference in value, that there's a hard line between a light value and a dark value, then you will be able to paint any kind of shiny metal. Another way of putting it is contrast equals shininess. Here's the drawing of the 3 eggs and the wine bottle. The colors on my palette are yellow ochre, raw umber, indanthrone blue, Perylene maroon, Pyroll red, and lemon yellow. I'm going to lay down a dilute mixture of yellow ochre, and I'm leaving some white unpainted. The brush I'm using is an Ochre Quill size 6. While the wash is wet, I'm dropping in a little bit of cobalt blue or a little bit of ultramarine blue to make the gradient that you see on the bottom half of the eggs. The shadow that I'm dropping in right now is a gray color that I make with indanthrone blue and raw umber. Using a combination of raw umber and burnt sienna, I'm starting to build in a middle value of the reflections on the eggs. This is not the final color, it's a base color that I'll then paint over later. I'm using a similar approach for the wine bottle where while the base layer is still wet, I'm dropping in a combination of raw umber and indanthrone blue to make a gray, working wet into wet. To start to darken the wine bottle more, I'm dropping in pure indanthrone blue into the wash wet and wet. I'm coming back with a darker value of the indanthrone and raw umber gray that I mixed. So now it's approaching the color black. Now I want to work on the reflections on the eggs. And I'm doing this by bringing in some of the black that I've mixed up. And now I'm going to add in a little bit of raw umber and yellow ochre mix to feather that out and do a bit of a gradient on the egg. I've mixed up a few different colors. A little bit of yellow ochre, a little bit of raw umber, some indanthrone blue, and that gives me some options as I'm working out the colors on the eggs. The trick here is that I've laid down some dark color and then come back with a little bit light color and blended that color into the black to try to make a gradient, to try to make it smooth. Also, on these eggs, they're actually plastic. They snap together. They're meant to put something inside for little kids. I don't like the ridges, so I'm not painting the ridges of the eggs. Where this can get a bit tricky is that as you look at the reference photo, you can see there are a lot of different reflections in the eggs. It shows the surroundings of the eggs, which was in my dining room, so you can see a little bit of the china cabinet. You can see the lights that are in the ceiling, and then the eggs are reflecting each other. So that makes for a very complex composition as the three eggs are touching each other. It's almost abstract. The trick here is to be able to work wet and wet, or work wet onto dry and then soften the edge. And if you followed any of my other videos where I've done florals, it's a common technique to lay down a color and then go back with a damp brush and soften that edge. That's a very useful technique here. Notice how I'm continuing to use the same three colors: yellow ochre, raw umber, burnt sienna, Indanthrone blue. They're all on the palette. I'm restricting myself to that limited palette so that I can have the continuity in the colors. Also, notice how I'm continuing to use the same technique over and over, where I lay down a color wet onto dry and then soften that edge with a damp brush. The other thing you might have noticed is that this choice of colors, while golden in and of itself, doesn't exactly match the reference photo. That wasn't my goal. I wanted to say these are golden eggs next to a wine bottle, and it will say that. You don't have to get super hung up on the colors, either by choice or by accident. In the end, it's the value that counts. I could have painted these with green or blue or pink. As long as I have those sharp contrasts between light and dark values, they would look shiny. Now I'm working on the final value of the wine bottle. And this is the darkest value. It's still a combination of Indanthrone blue and raw umber, but mostly Indanthrone blue. And you can see it's pretty dark. I'm mixing in some Perylene Maroon to get an orange color. Here I use a little bit of lemon yellow. For the background, I'm working wet onto dry with a slightly grayed down version of cobalt blue. To gray down my blues, I add a complementary color such as raw umber or burnt sienna. Now for the shadow of the wine bottle, that is a darker blue-gray using Indanthrone and cobalt blue. I'm going in now with the final details. Using a white gel pen is a handy way to go back and restore some of the lost highlights. You can also use white gouache to do the same thing. If you feel like you need some practice with the basic techniques employed in this video, check out this playlist.